Welcome boys and girls, Costin here with a discussion about the Tides of Torment DLC for Warhammer 3 and what Creative Assembly has revealed regarding the High Elves, as well as what they're doing for Norsca and Slaanesh. So, with respect to the High Elves, as they had previously announced, the Legendary Lord is going to be Sea Lord Aislinn. Now, a couple of interesting details that they did share in their video is that Aislinn is apparently going to be a more aggressive Legendary Lord on the campaign map. Or maybe that's going to be the dynamic he's going to have in his campaign of going out there, dealing with stuff preemptively. Or, as the Romans would call it, fighting a quote-unquote defensive war in order to neutralize a threat before it becomes a real issue. So, Aislinn is very much within that particular line of thinking, and based on the things that they were talking about, that seems like he is a natural rival to Lokir. Makes perfect sense. I imagine that's the case in the lore, though it does beg the question of what he's going to do in terms of a campaign starting position. Are they going to add him in Cafe? Could open up some possibilities though over there, to be sure. Are they going to add him elsewhere in terms of the campaign map and only have to deal with Lokir from a storyline perspective? That's the big question mark. One of the things they did mention with respect to the story is they are going to have a bigger narrative focus in this DLC, whereas they didn't have that for Omens of Destruction. If you look at Thrones Decay, one of the things that made Thrones Decay so good is that even though the narrative focus in Immortal Empire was lesser than it was in Realms of Chaos in terms of cinematics and so on, you did still have that significantly with the adventures, with the heroes, the chieftains that Tamerkhan could get. And so if we can get a narrative-focused campaign in Immortal Empires with choices, maybe not so much storyline choices, but still decisions to be made from a gameplay standpoint, that kind of stuff, that would be really good. And I do wonder, watching the video on the subject, whether or not the reason for the delay had a lot to do with this. Because CA may say certain things that, oh, this is the reason we delayed it. And that reason may actually be completely true, but there's also some other stuff as well. Like, for instance, with 6.3, yes, AMD crashing issues, that's probably the biggest reason, but there's also a whole bunch of bugs and issues with 6.3 as well that they're hopefully going to resolve. So, narrative-focused campaign. What else did they talk about? Well, they did show off a Mist Mage for the High Elves, which is, from a tabletop perspective, I'm imagining that it's just a mage. Like, on tabletop, it would just be a mage with a lore of magic. If you look at actual mage models on the tabletop, you would find some stuff that's pretty similar or along those lines. So that's going to be our hero choice, but I do wonder about our generic lord choice, because they are going to add a generic lord. Now, it could be an anointed of Asuryan, it could be a Sea Helm. The leaks that we had detailing what we would get mentioned the Sea Helm. Like, they mentioned Aislinn, they mentioned Caradrian of the Flame as a legendary hero, so I am really curious with respect to the generic hero. Fun fact, we get water elementals for the High Elves, which was also in the leak that I talked about, Chinese quote-unquote leak, like, yeah, water elementals, and plenty of people were skeptical about that. I guess the big question mark is with regards to the Praeton as a unit. Just gives you an idea. And just keep in mind something with regards to leaks. The leaks might be the information at the time, but decisions do change in a company, as we've seen many times with Creative Assembly. So that's in terms of new content. So Aislinn, Skycutter, Mist Mage, Water Elementals, 2 types. We'll see what else they do add on top of it. Maybe not everything is going to match. Sure, you can't really expect it with those details, but the essence of things. Then they talked about the High Elf reworks, some details on that subject. one of the important things is that the High Elves are now going to be able to get a Confederation mechanic in the race, and they specifically gave a comparison to the Great Book of Grudges system for the dwarves, where if you're playing a dwarven campaign, you can confederate all the other dwarves through the Great Book of Grudges. And that's apparently something that the High Elves are going to have, or a similar system to that, which is pretty great, because if you're playing a High Elf campaign at the moment, one of the things that hurts you in a Emmerich campaign or in an Alefanar campaign is that Ulthuan is really, really valuable, even if it's not necessarily the best climate, which, by the way, should be improved for Alefanar. Ulthuan may not be the best climate, but it has so many great things in it. And one of the things I would hope they change is like the tiers of landmarks, because having a tier 5 landmark in a province with 2 settlements with a limited growth there can be a bit annoying. So they're reworking the situation with Confederation, and they are also reworking the situation for Teclis and Tyrion. They didn't go into details, but one of the things they did mention with regards to Teclis is that he should be the most, or one of the most powerful mages in the setting, not Gelt, right? They made that comparison. So we're going to get something like a White Tower of Hove mechanic. I guess we'll find out how that plays out. Maybe something similar to Gelt, maybe something a bit different, maybe something more powerful. I mean, Teclis should be a far more powerful mage. And when we're thinking about power, yes, I do literally mean army-ending abilities that Gelt has. Like, Gelt has those abilities, you know, Cataclysm spells. Gelt does have that, Teclis doesn't. And honestly, Teclis may be able to spam a lot of spells, but he doesn't have anything really, really powerful, which he should. Like, if you look at the lore that Teclis has. As for Tyrion, didn't go into any real details, but they did mention, like, his war focus as a character, so they're looking to reflect on that. So that's with High Elves. Those are the things that they did mention with respect to High Elves. Encouraging. And I'm really happy that they are improving the situation for Teclis and Tyrion. I would kind of hope that they take a look at the way the mechanics for Alefanar, for Emmerich, for Elfarion do work, how every other High Elven campaign does work. Not in terms of necessarily adding new mechanics, but for instance, if you're playing an Elfarion campaign, one of the things I would really like is not having to fight every single battle to just capture lords. Like battles that you know you'll win. 100% of the time you'll win, regardless of your army configuration. Like, there are ways to cheese the auto-resolve. Sure, you know, flamethrower units, but that's not what I'm talking about right here. Now, for Slaanesh and Norsca, they did go into more detail on what they're doing for those races, in particular with Norsca. So Trog is going to get unique mechanics, they're redoing monster hunts, and they went into some detail on how that's going to work. And one of the things they touched upon is the fact that they do want Norsca to have this kind of focus in their campaign on raiding hostile shores. And they do want to figure out a way to make that work. Because one of the problems we do have right now in Norsca is if you look at their tech tree, they get a bunch of benefits for taking over certain settlements all over the world. But if you're playing a Norscan campaign, that's not how you play it right now. It just doesn't work. So maybe some sea movement, maybe some more sea lanes around the world to deal with that. Teleportation, of course, with Wulfric, I think that would make a lot of sense because he does have that in the lore. And in fact, Wulfric is one of the very few characters in the lore who can teleport an entire army with relative ease compared to many others. Like, teleportation in Warhammer does exist, but generally speaking, there are limitations on that. And doing it constantly is not something a lot of people can do. So, Wulfric, they did talk about that before. Trog, details on Trog is new. And it does seem to me that, based on what they were talking in this video, that some of these things, like the narrative focus of campaigns, or unique mechanics for existing lords is something that would not have happened had they not delayed the DLC. Though, who knows exactly what's going on in Creative Assembly with regards to that. But it does make me wonder, with respect to CA, what exactly is going on in the company at the moment? Because we're seeing like DLC delays, we're seeing questionable decisions made by them. Not bad decisions necessarily, but questionable in the sense like timing wise. Now, if we are to believe some of the leaks, it's like they're working on 40k and they're working on Medieval 3 apparently. And if that's the case, if most of the people there are on board with that, then I'm guessing they have relatively few people working on DLC. Though something like Forge of the Cast Dwarves was done by like 10, 20 people. If I remember Andy Hall talking about like how many people were working on Forge of the Cast Dwarves, I would really be interested in seeing how many people are working on maintaining Warhammer 3 and doing content for Warhammer 3 at the moment. But the things they did reveal, pretty solid. The downside, the really big downside in all of this, is that they gave a kind of timeline or launch window for Tides of Torment. And it's going to be late October. Admittedly, to me personally, that is frustrating because we're basically looking at almost a year between DLCs. Like, yes, not quite a year, so, something like 10 months, really closer to 11 months between Omens of Destruction and Tides of Torment. And, just for my personal perspective, I really do hope that we're not going to get that going forward with regards to DLC. Though something interesting to mention on this with respect to DLC, it might just be that after Tides of Torment comes out, we'll only get one more major DLC for Warhammer 3, and that's an End Times DLC, so Nagash, Tanquil, etc. And then we would get Neferata and the Monkey King as their own standalone DLC. I imagine Fire Dragon would probably be a free DLC, Legendary Lord attached to the Monkey King. That would be my suspicion on the subject, on what could happen with respect to it. I mean, there's all kinds of DLCs that they could do. They might even do a Moonclaw standalone DLC or, free Legendary Lord. We'll find out on that subject. But what do you guys expect with regards to their DLC schedule? Because look, regardless of when it happens in 2026, there is going to be a Total War game coming out in 2026. And when it does, they're probably not going to put too much time and effort developing content for Warhammer 3. They'll probably have a team working on patches, bug fixes, etc., but not necessarily new content or very small content. So after a new Total War comes out, that's pretty much it in terms of major content for Warhammer 3. So I would be very skeptical that they would continue developing content as the way they have. So we might just get one more DLC after Tides of Torment. We'll find out. Questine signing out. Stay tuned for more.